In terms of the Common Core standards, uh, I mentioned they were mandated in 2009.
Correct.
So when did they start in the Ravenswood City School District?
It's been ongoing, I would say, for the last 3 years. I came on board just last year as Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. And so we've been implementing Common Core with more fidelity in the last 2 years. One, by actually aligning our professional development so teachers are feeling more comfortable with Common Core.
So I had mentioned at the top in a very halting way that you that you are a leader of first grade teachers.
Yeah.
And so I would assume in your position you've been able to see a lot of reaction
Yes.
from the teachers in
Definitely.
terms of the Common Core standards.
Yeah.
And so what type of reactions have you had?
Well, I think, in our district, we have a lot of teachers that are really willing and ready to try and do anything to support our students. So I've seen a lot of people just jumping on board with whatever initiative we've been rolling out. All our professional development that we've been trying to offer, or ones that we've been attending. I think people are kind of looking for what can they gain from going to that professional development, what can we gain from working with each other, and just really diving into the Common Core. I don't think that's true everywhere. I've heard a lot of pushback in other districts and in other areas, other states. This wasn't just adopted in California. The Common Core, is across the nation. So, yeah, I think it really varies, and it depends on where you're at and what kind of support you have, I think, with how people are feeling about it.
Deborah, can you hear us?
Hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. We can't see you. We'd love to be able to see you. I had mentioned, I had asked about the reaction of teachers. What about the reaction of your organization?
So the California Alliance of African American Educators has a rather simple stance about the Common Core standards, and that is that unless children are properly scaffolded, um, they will not be able to reach those standards.
Now, when you talk about scaffolding, what do you mean?
I mean, provided tiered support so that they are prepared enough to actually meet the standards. And the standards are more rigorous than they were before. And we already have this pernicious gap that won't go away between black and brown students and white and most Asian students. And so my organization's position is unless we prepare the children very thoroughly to access the standards, they will result in more pushouts and more dropouts.
So, Lorena, you would like to react to that, obviously.
I would, and I think that really has to do with the professional development that takes place with our teachers. And I would agree that there needs to be a lot of scaffolding even for our teachers, because we're going from an era where everything was scripted, where teachers knew exactly what to say by the book, and now we're saying think outside the box. Be more creative, bring your critical thinking skills, but we have to model. And so one of the initiatives that we have at Ravenswood is to say, look, we need to model the lesson and show you what does it look like in the classroom, not just to come in and give you the paperwork or talk about the theory, but actually walk you through the process so when you go back into the classroom, you're able to implement those strategies.
Do you think, Erin, that the teachers feel that they're getting that support, or do they feel comfortable?
Yeah, it really varies. I think, once again, that word's probably going to keep coming up this evening. But, we have new teachers, and I think new teachers, it's overwhelming regardless of what standards they were teaching. It's just going to be rough your first year. And I just want to clarify, too, that Ravenswood is in East Palo Alto, because a lot of people might not know where Ravenswood City School District is. So we have a student population that comes in, and there's a disparity between East Palo Alto and Palo Alto and what our students come in with, and I think that teachers require a lot of support. And we talked about BITSA recently in our district. We're having an overhaul right now. BITSA is Beginning Teacher Support. It's a program to make sure that teachers feel like they're getting the support they need. And the professional development we're being offered with our district, I think has improved a lot in the last couple of years too. We're seeing more experts coming in and teaching us about the Common Core, and not just about the Common Core because it hasn't been around that long, but about how to actually teach reading and how to get them to think critically and how to reason and explain yourself, and kind of even language acquisition, which is really difficult for our students. A lot of them are English language learners, like 85% in our school alone. So there's a lot of professional development. I think it can just continue to get better.
So Deborah, do you hear us?
I hear you perfectly. Thank
Okay,
you.
and you heard what Lorena and what Erin had to say. And do you have any reaction? Because you had talked about the necessary support.
Right, and you know, I trained as a high school teacher. I went through the Stanford Teacher Education Program 1,000 years ago, and when I came out in 1977, you know, I was determined to reach all children in my high school English classes. Unfortunately, I found that my ninth graders, in many cases, were reading at fifth and sixth grade level, and the grade point average when I started teaching 37 years, 30, almost 38 years ago, for Black students in the East Side Union High School District in San Jose was 1.5. And when I finished teaching and took an early retirement 3 years ago, it was 1.9. That is criminal and obscene. And the reason why the California Alliance takes a rather jaded position when it comes to the Common Core standard is because of that kind of data. That's just one district, but I serve on several statewide committees looking at the gap. I served on Jack O'Connell's P16 Council. We came up with 14 policy recommendations before he termed out as state superintendent of public instruction, and not one of those policies ever got traction in any of the districts.
We'll get back to those 14 recommendations that you just now pointed to. I'm going to give Lorena a chance to respond. And in the meantime, is it possible for us to see you by Skype? We're looking at two things. That's so much better. So Lorena, you wanted to make a comment.
I would agree with Deborah that there is a huge achievement gap, and we don't have to go very far because we're here in Ravenswood, and 70% of our students are English learners. We have approximately 12% of our students are special ed, and then plus we have about 12% African American. So there is a huge gap because when they go to Menlo, Atherton, or Sequoia in general, our students are falling through the cracks. The graduation rate is fairly low. One of the things that we are moving forward with as a district is to ensure that we are working closely with Sequoia to say how are we going to bring that achievement gap, and collaborating with teachers from Sequoia, especially from 6th through 8th grade, to see how can we align the Common Core standards to the high school Common Core standards as well. The other piece that I see is that we need to have those ongoing discussions with both districts, because it's the feeder and the assumption that is constantly being made that, you know, well, our children can't learn because they come from a poor environment or the low income or students of color. But as teachers, I think having that collaboration time to share ideas and to actually start implementing some of these strategies, we've seen some progress.
So you had mentioned like teacher attitudes, and I'm just wondering, as a teacher working with other teachers, what type of attitudes do you usually run into?
Yeah, you know, I think, well, I can say that something I've seen with the Common Core, something that I think most of us can appreciate, and something I can, I guess, only speak for myself, but is that the Common Core, the idea was that we were taking these skills that we felt like were necessary to get students to graduate high school, to move into college, and to take that across the whole United States, because before the Common Core standards, every state had its own idea of what meant that there was learning success and what proficiency looked like in each of those states. So the idea of the Common Core was just to equalize across the United States. And I can appreciate that working in East Palo Alto that I have these standards that if I can make my child meet those goals, that they hopefully will be successful in second grade then and third and continue on and have the skills necessary to be successful college students and high
That's
school
what
students.
you as a teacher feel. Do you get that feedback from other teachers? Because it's my understanding in some cases, because they do work in a school district like East Palo Alto, they may have kind of come in with certain notions of the learning capacity of their students.
Right. I think East Palo Alto, we've been doing an incredible job thinking that our children can succeed and expecting the highest, setting the highest expectations for our students. I don't see that in all districts. I don't see that in all states.
So,
for sure.
so is that something that you run into, Deborah, in terms of the
all over
teachers'
the
attitude?
all over the state of California, and I know these are both veteran educators. They know that institutional racism is alive and well. It plays a major role in keeping the gap wide. Also, implicit bias. There are unconscious bias. There are low expectations the part of teachers who don't believe, as this first grade teacher does, that all children can learn. I mean, we love to have her in all of our first grade classes around the state, and then we would not have kids getting to me in high school not able to read at the ninth grade level. So there are just a lot of hurdles in the California school system. I'm currently on the accreditation advisory panel for the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and what we're looking at is the rewriting of what teachers should know and be able to do. We're rewriting the standards, and one of the things that we are infusing now, one of the concepts is culturally responsive teaching. And I'm sure in a school district like Ravenswood, that's probably sort of the norm for them. But I don't know. I'd like to ask that first grade teacher, what happens after they leave your class? Have you all been able to follow those children and see whether or not they are getting to middle school and high school reading at grade level and doing math at grade level? Or where are they falling apart? Where are they falling back? Why does the gap why does it persist? One of the assistant superintendent who's on, she mentioned that there's a high dropout rate, often push out rate for kids coming out of Ravenswood, and I'm just wondering if you all have done any longitudinal studies about when do they start stumbling?
Okay, Deborah, let's give them a chance. You have several excellent questions. Follow-ups. Anyone following up on the first graders?
Actually, we have follow-up in the sense that as we move forward with Common Core and now with the local control funding formula for our district, we're investing in we hire what we call a transition coordinator for high school, where it's helping us to help our students succeed as they go into high school. And so one of the things that we are also looking into is working closely with the Garden Center to see, okay, how are our students doing?
When you say the Gardner Center at Stanford University?
Correct. To start doing more of the research and seeing, okay, how are Ravenwood students moving when they go to Sequoia? We are investing quite a bit of money in bringing more of that awareness through AVID too, to ensure that our students are well prepared.
And what's AVID?
Oh gosh,
it's a learning system.
Advanced, thank you.
Advancement via individual determination.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I just went blank. I appreciate that. So ensuring that, we have AVID electives, and that's opening doors for many of our students so they could start looking into colleges.
And the follow-up, she had asked in terms of follow-up, first grade, have you had a chance? Let's see, you've been there, I think you said
6 years in East Palo Alto, 7 years teaching. So some of my students are now, I taught second grade first, so they're in 8th grade now. And I think one of the biggest gaps we see in East Palo Alto is, as Lorena was speaking about, from middle school specifically to high school. And I haven't done any kind of longitudinal study that's not in my capacity as a first grade teacher as far as getting those numbers. From keeping up with my own students, I like to check in with them often because the middle school that a lot of them go to is right behind my school at the elementary school level, so it's really great to continue to see them and meet with the family. I've heard, and so this is hearsay, that in the high school level, because there's a lot of students that aren't able to be redesignated as non-English learners anymore, that they're fully learned the language enough, have enough language acquisition. When they move to high school, they're still taking certain courses that they have to take as English language learners, which means that they might not be able to take the same coursework that would get them to be competitive in a college level setting.
So are you satisfied, Deborah, with what you've heard, or you have?
Actually, can I add to
Yes.
what Erin is saying? When we're talking about English learners, and we have 70% of our population in Ravenswood that are considered English learners students, what we are trying to do is to bring that awareness to our parents. So our parents are being more proactive. What does it mean to be an English learner, and what does the California English Language Development Test entail? Because a lot of our kids are not taking this test very serious. And one of the changes that I've seen, and in my work, being in education for 18 years, is that if we're not working collaboratively with our parents and bringing that awareness, you're not going to create that change. So we've been very proactive in bringing that information to the parents to say, okay, what is Common Core and what does it look like? What type of questions should you be asking your teachers? But not only that, become familiar with the assessments. What type of assessments are our kids going to be taking now? We're talking about Smarter Balance. And so bringing that awareness and praising our students for being successful, it's starting to change the mentality.
You mentioned Smarter Balance. Before we get to you, Deborah, let me just make a follow-up. You said some of the students aren't taking it seriously. Why would the students not be taking it seriously?
When I'm speaking more is about the California English Language Development Test, because
Yes.
and that's actually a test that has been given to a second language learner. When you step into a U.S. school and you speak another language other than English, or don't speak any English, you're automatically classified as an English learner.
So how is it that the students would not be taking that
Because
test?
they don't quite understand. A lot of our kids end up in remedial classes. A lot of our students are not familiar with the system. We have been very proactive in the sense that we are bringing that awareness to our parents to what does A through G requirements mean, and how can my child be attending a 4-year college or a 2-year college or vocational school, as you know, once they graduate from high school. But what steps do they need to take as early as kindergarten or first grade?
Sure. Now, Deborah, you've heard some of the responses. Would you have any responses of your own?
Well, I'm happy to hear that Ravenswood is engaging its parents. As a veteran teacher, I work like
Oh dear.
for 35 years.
You're breaking up.
Before I took early retirement 3 years ago. Yes, and I feel that. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah, I was just saying that I'm glad to hear the assistant superintendent say that they're working with parents, because that's critical. The work I do has always engaged parents, and helping them become, the best advocates for their children is one of the most important roles an educator can play.
Now, you mentioned working on the credentialing of teachers. So have those standards changed over the years, and what do you see in terms of teachers now coming into the system?
Well, the last time I checked, Latino students were 52% of the K through 12 population in California, and so there has to be intentional support for those children. Many of them are English language learners, and so there have been revisions of the standards. I don't know how often the standards are revised. This is the first time I've been on this end of the standards work. But I think what I'm seeing that's really different is, as I pointed out earlier, an emphasis on what's called culturally responsive instruction or culturally responsive teaching. And that's where teachers are trained in schools of education to pay attention to the whole child and realize that the child brings prior knowledge and experiences to the educational table. And those should not be denigrated. They should not be, you know, put down in any way, but rather celebrated because they make up the whole child.
Okay, so let's talk about that in terms of culturally sensitive training. What's going on as far as teachers are concerned?
Yeah, you know,
Because most of them, a lot of them in the Ravenswood City School District don't live in the city
right.
and live in other areas.
Definitely. You know, I think Deborah was saying too, how often the standards have changed. And so I'm not sure if they've even changed since when I was in school, because I just got my credentialing 7 years ago. And a lot of the coursework I took, being in California specifically too, there is a lot about institutionalized racism, what we can look for as far as the whole child approach to teaching, and thinking about that our students are coming in with these amazing strengths and abilities, that everybody has a different set of background knowledge and where they're coming from as far as their income levels, and looking at the child and thinking that they can achieve. And I know Deborah was saying that, you know, that might not be true everywhere, and it's not necessarily true all throughout California. She works with more districts, it sounds like, clearly than I do. So I think there's
Well, that's the theory.
Yeah.
The amazing students, but when it comes right down to the in the classroom, is there that feeling? These are amazing students. They bring all of these talents.
Definitely. Our showcases, I think, are great with reaching out with the families.
Well, and I have to applaud Deborah for actually incorporating the culturally responsive into the teaching credential standards, because I went through the multicultural center back in Sacramento State University, and so we had that training, and I can honestly say that really made a difference in me as a teacher, because I was able to connect with every child regardless of their race, color, or ethnic background.
Give us an example of what that training entailed.
That training entailed respect, tolerance, honoring children's background, and also bringing multicultural literature into the classroom that children were able to relate to. So I went through the era where open court was in full influx, and we had the scripted program. But for me, it was, I couldn't reach all of my children. So I would always, and I was using this earlier with Erin, I would supplement materials. So if we were reading a story, usually, let me give you the example of February. It's African-American month, right? How do we bring that literature into our children's hands? And how do we compare and contrast to other leaders who have created change in our systems? And let me tell you, what I saw is that children loved reading once they were able to connect to something that came from their background. So it really makes a difference. I'm really happy, and I hope that happens, because that will make a difference in our educational system. And I would agree that, yes, we do have teachers who still push back, because that's not my job. But how do we bring that as leaders at the district level? And I've been blessed to be working with Dr. Hernandez, who is Dr. Hernandez Goff, who's
the
superintendent of Ravenswood, and believes in every child, and has allowed me to be creative in my job and also think outside the box.
So let's talk about some challenges. And I don't know if you can stay with us for the whole time, Deborah, but under some circumstances, I think you had mentioned that some students might be doing even worse under the Common Core standards. What circumstances would that involve?
Well, again, I'm concerned about those students who were not able to access the standards before Common Core was introduced. And so those were the students who were that we read about all the time that are, far below basic. They're not at proficiency. Um, and so that's the group I'm always concerned about, because if they weren't meeting the standards before, and now these are more rigorous, these are requiring critical thinking skills. There was even an article that talked about, the technology skills that kids need now, because like smarter balance tests and the park tests, those are all based on computers. I mean, they have to be able to use computers. And so there might be some issues around kids who are, and it's hard to believe that there might be kids growing up into this day and age that are not proficient in computer use, but nonetheless, there might be some.
Yes, I think a lot of them in the Ravenswood City School District.
You don't have to go very far, because
Yes.
we do have those in Ravenswood. And one of the challenges, and it was actually appalling to me, Deborah, coming to this district, I worked in the Central Valley for many years. But coming here and knowing that we're in the heart of the Silicon Valley, and we didn't have,
Yes.
we didn't have enough
Exactly.
computers for our kids. So let me tell you, we had to spend half of our Common Core money just to ensure that every child had at least, one.
We're still buying
we're still
technology
buying
and computers
technology, but
and iPads.
ensuring that they had computers to be able to compete with the SBAC. The other challenge that I see is having the technology that works effectively. And again, I'm shocked, because this is happening here in the
Right in the vicinity of Yahoo and Google and Facebook.
Right.
And
Yes.
Yes. Challenges you find with first graders.
Well, technology, there's a lot of studies that show that they shouldn't necessarily learn typing right away in first grade, so we haven't been working with that yet. But just giving them the exposure to technology in general, I think, has been one of our first steps as far as getting them anywhere close to being competent on computers before they have to take the Smarter Balance test in third grade. I'm also thankful, by the way, that the test has now moved from second grade, is when they first had to take the test, to now third grade. So that makes me a little bit happier. Something that was just thinking about when I was hearing both of these wonderful women speak was about not only the standards, but how we're teaching those standards. Because the idea of the Common Core also was that the standards were simplified, and that states were supposed to take 90% of the Common Core, but then do about 10% of whatever standards they felt like were important. And I was just at a big conference in Ohio for reading recovery teachers, and Mary Freed, who's worked with Mari Clay, that kind of started reading recovery in the United States, she spoke about that she feels like teachers also need to be giving that 10%. Like, what is your 10% that you're giving that makes your classroom different, that's supporting your students, that you're the one who starts to know your class the best. And so I think one of the biggest challenges for Common Core is, believing in our students is first, of course, but then after that is how do I get my children speaking so that they can dive deeply into these standards. And a lot of the standards have been simplified in certain ways. It's just how we talk about those things. It's not just saying 2 + 2 is 4. It's how did I know that 2 + 2 is 4?
No, the